All right, so now we're recording our third lecture. So this is meeting 3 for the Arch 3592 class on Fridays. So in the last class, we left over where we learned about pro-Boolean and regular Boolean, where we can take multiple objects and we can create, something like this, where we can subtract elements, make a more abstract looking shape, right? And that was the last class. This class, because you guys are not meeting next week, and there's a holiday. Actually, I don't know what's next week, but I know that I saw that it's no classes. So you'll be missing one class. So I'm going to focus today's entire lecture on, going from basic to, somewhat advanced materials, right? So that you can practice over the next 2 weeks, applying materials to different, elements, right? And then when you guys come back from the break, from that, time off, then we jump into our first, project, which is the Azuma house, right, by Tadao Ando. So again, today we'll try to do a lot of things in class. I'll go slow, so please, anything that's not clear, stop me, and I'll go back and do it again. All right, let me just double check my attendance. Let's see, I already have almost everyone. Okay, I see Pearl there.
Good morning.
Good morning, Christopher. Are you there? Christopher Garo. No. Jaden. Rachel?
Here.
Perfect. May?
Here.
Eduardo?
Here, Professor.
Kayla?
I'm here. Good morning.
Good morning. Zoe?
Here.
Okay. And Tiffany?
Here.
All right, if I didn't call your name, that means I already got you before by looking at the screen. So we're missing only Christopher and Jaden. All right, not bad. All right, so let's get started here. So
Professor, I didn't comment name.
who's this? Sorry. Is it? Can you tell me again? I couldn't hear you again. Can you tell me your name?
Yushen.
Let's see. Oh yeah, I already got you. Don't worry. Yes.
Okay.
Also, Wing, are you there?
Roy, yeah, I'm here, Roy.
Wing, right?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay. All right, so let's go back to 3D Max here. Right? Let me get a few things set up. And we're gonna do today, again, start from very basic materials, go into more advanced things like glossiness, transparencies, glass, metal, and those things, right? So, and we can also about bumps, right? How to make our bumps, how to make a more precise material that we can control different elements, including how to control the bump, the reflection, and the diffuse map. So this way we have more control to create something that looks more realistic. So this scene, let's see here. So what I have here right now is just some basic elements, right? So, I mean, this is the model that I did in your class last week, right? So from what I'm seeing here is I didn't insert any camera last week. Is that true, or did I just say the model?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so that means, okay, so actually, so maybe I won't get to cover that much because, okay, so we haven't put cameras here, and it looks like I haven't made the Vray settings yet, right?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, so let's do that now. So I'm going to, so let's do that from the beginning. It looks like you guys, I have to cover a bit more, but that's okay. Let's see how much we can get in class. All right, so once we have, modeled these things, right, it could be a number of different shapes. I'm gonna make, make a simple box from the top right menu and just, give it like a ground plane, right, something very simple. Right now, it's about, so this is, pretty big, 265 feet by 115 feet. So that tells me that, right now I'm not really working to scale with these things, right? So I click in this box and I select it with the selection tool here. And I click on properties, which is this little square box on the top right. This box, okay, it's not bad. It's 6 feet by 7 feet by 35 feet. So it's something that we can relate to in scale, which is fine. So I'm going to make a couple of other shapes here, I'm gonna make some boxes here. And those are there to help me, work with other shapes, right? I'm gonna copy the box. We did learn copy, right, in the class last time?
Yeah, we did learn.
Yes.
So hold down the shift key, and I do copy as a copy, so they're both independent, right? And I'll make a couple other shapes, let's say we do a sphere. And those are just there to help me, try out different materials, right? Let's see, we can do also a cylinder. And then I'm just copying it to the right, to the left here. All right, so we have a bunch of different shapes here. And then I'm also gonna do if you go to here where it says standard primitives, if you click on the arrow, we have also the extended primitives, which are more advanced looking shapes. So I'm going to add here one that's called a torus knot. And this shape really has no function for, for architecture. It's just a shape that is good to test out, materials, right? Because it's a very complex looking, shape. And if you look at it here, I'll bring it up. It's a knot. It almost looks like a pretzel, and it's interlocking each other. So again, this shape, when we test out advanced materials like glass, metal, it provides some very interesting reflections, right? So it's a good thing to use. And then the last one, I'm gonna go back to the top one here, standard primitives, and I'll use the one called teapot. So again, a teapot is another shape that is pretty much useless, right, in 3D Max, but it has been there since the beginning, when this was released for the first time. And what it gives you is a very simple shape, which is also actually pretty complex, where you can start to apply a material and kind of get more an advanced feeling of what a material looks like, right? Because it has curves, it's a complex shape. So if you apply glass, something glossy, something metallic, it will give you a very quick way to test out the material. So this is why it's there, just to help you out with the material, testing. So these shapes that I made are just there for me to test out today, some materials. We have all these different things here. And I might create other ones later. Actually, let me do also one more. Let's see here. This will be a very, thin material, something like this. And let's say that I'm gonna click on this element. I'm gonna make the thickness be, so in this case, it's the width. I'm gonna make it be 1 inch, right? So later you guys can try to make something, similar to this. I mean, if you want, I can give you guys, actually, I'll give you guys the exact dimension, so it'll be easier. So this shape will make it, the length will be 9 feet. The width is 1 inch, and the height will be 19 feet, that shape. This box, we're gonna make it, let's do 6 feet by 6 feet by, let's make it 20 feet, right? So I'm gonna take this one, delete it, this one, and copy it over here. So two of the same boxes. The sphere, we're gonna make the radius be 7 feet. 7 feet radius. And I'm gonna double the segments from 32 to 64 to a bit more precise geometry. Same thing here, let's make it 7 feet. And double the segments to 64. Same thing with this, you see how it's not a very good looking cylinder. You can see a lot of straight lines. So let's select it. We'll make the radius be 6 feet. The height be 18 feet. And radius, 18 seems to be pretty small, so let's make the sides 50. That gives a very nice curved edge to this shape, right? Okay, I'm just gonna delete that and copy it over so it's easier. This shape also is pretty complex, so I'm gonna click on this shape. And let's make the radius be 5 feet. Segments is already pretty good. That's 120 segments. So I wouldn't change that. And the cross-sectional radius, we'll make that be 2 feet. That will give us this looking shape there. And for the teapot, we'll make the radius be 9 feet. And segments, I will add more because it only has 8 segments, which is very small. So if you see here, around here, it looks pretty straight, right? So I'm gonna make this 30 segments. So we get a much nicer, smoother edge around the, the teacup teapot. And those are the shapes that we're gonna use in class, right? So ideally, you know, these are gonna be used for testing out things like brick, concrete, you know, this could be used to test out something glossy, glass, metallic, right? This is eventually we'll use to test out glass, right? Something very thin. And we can try also later these advanced shapes to try out combining the different materials, you know, to create those things. And this is something that we had last time in class. So for now, I'm going to delete this. This we don't need anymore. And I'm gonna keep, you know, these shapes that we have here. So I'll see if we get to them today, but for now, let's focus on these things. All right, so before we do anything, right, I have to be able to document my work, right? So that means I have to be able to render something, right? And as I mentioned before, we're gonna be doing weekly renderings, right, that you guys submit. So just document your process throughout the class, right? So typically it'll be between 3 renderings per class. You know, you can always do more if you want, which is better. But before we can render, we have to set up our settings, right? So that we can render. So let's go over the settings that we need for Vray. Right? So first of all, we must hit this box over here. It looks like a teapot with a little wheel, right? That's your render setup box. So when you open 3D Max for the first time, it's gonna show this. It's gonna show this. It's gonna say render Arnold, right? That's the default rendering that comes with 3D Max. But we're gonna switch that to Vray, right? So I'm gonna switch here and go to Vray 5, not Vray GPU. That we don't wanna use that one. So Vray 5, right? Close this. Okay, and then that will give us, you know, all these different settings. We have common settings, Vray settings, GI, and these 2 we're gonna ignore for now. So let's set up, you know, our settings, right? So before we get to this part, you know, I want to understand light in, you know, because Vray relies on ray tracing, right? That means it's able to detect the sun, the light bounce, and able to create a scene by seeing how the light will bounce off different elements, right? So let's start, you know, when we render something, right, we have to establish the size of the image, right? How big it is, you know, the quality. So when you first open it, it'll say custom, right? And it might say 640 by 480. Is this a good quality rendering? Can you guys tell me?
It's low.
It's very small, right? Very small, very low quality image, right? So again, you want an image that has more DPI, right? So dots per square inch or more pixels, right? So something this small, it's a really, really, really small rendering. That means that when you blow it up, it's gonna look like what?
Very pixelated.
Pixelated.
Yes, which means it's gonna look very blurry, right? The image. So I like to use a certain, if you look here on the custom, right? Custom gives you a bunch of default settings for rendering, you know, sizes. So I like to use the one called Vista Vision, right? So I will say try to use this one here. And it gives you 4 defined settings, you know, from very, very small up to very large image, right? To start the class, you know, let's just start off with the middle setting. So 1024 by 683. So I'm gonna set that rendering size to be default for now. And for now, let's close this off here. Right? So now we established a certain size of the rendering. The next thing that we have to do here is we have to, before I can render, what do I need in the scene?
Angle, camera angle.
Yeah, so we need a camera, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me, I'm gonna change for now because in my computer is already set by default. I'll go back to it later for you guys. Yeah, so before we do any rendering, I need to have a camera in the scene, right? So for that, let's first of all switch to a top view. Something like this, right? There's our scene, right? I'm gonna hit the G key to turn off the grid. So I can turn G by on and off. I'm gonna get a little close here so I can see, you know, my scene, which is these objects. And I'm going to add a camera to the scene, right? So if you go to the plus sign here in the top right corner, we have all these different things here: primitives, polylines, shapes, lights, cameras, and more advanced things here. Those we won't touch probably, but we're gonna focus on the first 4 that are here. So the one that says camera, we're gonna use that one. And we have different types of cameras. Standard, there's Vray, there's Arnold, but for some reason, the V-Ray camera doesn't work as well as the standard camera. So we're gonna use standard camera, and it'll be a physical camera. So I'm gonna click on physical, right? And then with your mouse, just click once and drag the camera towards your scene, right? And then let go, right? So now this is the camera, right? On the bottom, and that's the target, right? So I can always click here and move, right? On the top corner. I can click the back of the camera, right? Like this. I can move the camera in any direction. I can click the target, and I can focus the camera on different things, right? So now that we have a camera in the scene, let's go into more advanced. So right now on this view here, I'm looking at a view that is orthographic, right? Or it could be perspective. What view do I want to see here, ideally?
A render.
Yes, or the camera view, right? From this camera.
Perspective.
Well, if you put a camera here, right? Ideally, you want to see that viewport here that shows the view from this camera, right? So where it says here orthographic, right? If I click here, again, we can choose perspective, top, bottom, left, all those things. But on the top one, which is camera, now we have a choice to select one camera because we have one already picked out over here, right? If we have two cameras here, then we'll see two cameras shown here, right? And right now it's called physical camera 001. So it's a very, weird name. So I can always click the camera. I can go, let's see, to the properties of the camera, which is this one here, and I can change the name if I want to, right? And I can call this view 01, right? Something more simple, right? Enter. So when I click here, right, and I go here to orthographic in camera, it'll say view 01, right? Or it could be interior view, living space, kitchen, whatever you guys want. But you can have a custom name, and I can just click on this view, and we're gonna get the camera view there, right?
Sorry, Professor, to interrupt. I kind of missed the part where you place the camera. How do
The camera, okay, so if I place one more here, so you go here to the plus sign, the camera, right? Just click on camera, on physical one. Just click and drag it in the scene and let go. That's all. And once it's there, you can select the front or the back to modify the camera.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. So one thing that you will notice here in this viewport, it's what is wrong with this viewport? Why does it look black underneath here? Any guesses, maybe?
Is it under the grid?
It's close to that. So pretty much what happens here is when you insert any object in 3D Max, right? That camera always gets added to the ground plane, right? So it's right on the horizon line, the camera, right? So if I look here, the camera's right there. You see it right on the line where we have. So the next thing is we need to move the camera a little higher. So I can always pick the back of the camera, or I can pick the front. In this case, I want the camera to move at the same time. So if I pick the front here and I move it, it's gonna move the front of the camera, right? So I wanna pick the front of the camera, hold down the control key, which is multiple selection, and then switch to, let's say a left view, and I can move the camera. You see how the ground plane now becomes a certain color because now we're not in the actual ground, we're above the floor. So for now, just pick some viewport that gives you a bit more details. And once this camera is here, then again, we can see in real time what's happening. I can move the camera here, right? You guys can see here. I can move the back of the camera. I can move the front of the camera and look around this space like this. So for now in the camera, we're gonna make one change to the camera, right? Do you guys ever do photography, like with a professional camera, something like a DSLR?
No.
No? You know what's a typical lens for architecture? What are we?
25.
Yeah, very close to that. Something like 24, right? So they always make default lenses, so something like, it could be 20 millimeter, it could be 24 millimeter lens, but that lens offers a much wider field of view, right? So we can see, so we can capture more stuff in the scene, right? So if I click on this camera, the back of the camera here, and I go to the properties, right, tab, we're gonna get here pretty much everything we can modify in this camera. And there's a lot of things we can modify, too much actually. But for now, we're gonna focus on one thing, right? Just go down and look where it says lens, right? So by default, the camera has a lens of 40 millimeters, right? Which is a bit more of a lens to zoom in into something. So watch what happens to the viewport when I change from 40 to 24 millimeters. So our view now gets stepped out more because this lens is more of a wide angle lens, right? And you see what happens here to this kind of triangle, right? As I go forward, right, it gets more zoomed in, right? And the focus becomes very close, right? As I go backwards here, the field of view becomes much wider, right? So something like this, you know, like a 6 millimeter lens, that's called an ultra wide angle lens. And why don't I use a lens? You know, what's the negative for using something that extreme? What happens to my image?
It starts to become disproportionate.
Exactly, yeah. It gets heavily distorted, right? So, I mean, you can use lens like this, you know, they exist. But for us, you know, I will use between 20 millimeter and 24 millimeter, right? And for now, let's make it 24. So we can see more. And again, we're not going into an extreme wide angle, so we're not going to distort too much our scene, right? All right, so there's our camera. You know, again, we can modify it, you know, those things like this. What else can we do? The next thing is once I set my camera here, right? This viewport that's here that I'm looking for my camera, it's not really accurate. You know, this viewport, when I render, I would not get exactly what's there, right? So imagine that you had moved this this line here, right? And you can, again, you can adjust your viewports like this by clicking the middle and do all these things like that, right? So if my viewport was like this, right? And I hit render here, am I going to get an image that is this proportion? What do you think?
No, you're gonna get the camera shot.
Exactly. And the camera shot was, you know, was 1024 by 683. It has a defined proportion, right? So again, working like this, it's kind of deceiving because you're setting up your camera and you can't tell where's your limit, right? So what you have to always do is once you put your camera in your scene and you set up, you know, the camera and those things, go to where it says view, right, in that viewport, and go where it says show safe frame. So safe frame is gonna give you the exact camera proportion. So if I click here, you see now we have a yellow line around the perimeter and we have some black space on top and bottom. That means that black space, that means that we will not be rendering that space, right? This is the exact proportion that I define when I pick my photo size, right? So if I modify this viewport, right, to make it smaller, I still get the same proportion, right, no matter what happens. So I know always exactly when I move my camera, I know exactly what I'm going to see, right? I'm not guessing that there's something showing up that shouldn't be there. This yellow outline is my final cut zone or boundary for my shot. Okay. So once we have the camera there, right, technically now we can start to render, right? So let's see, well, let's start here. So I'm gonna put everything to default. So let's make it back to, so for now, I'm gonna put V-Ray, okay, that's it. These things are not set yet. Okay, so just put V-Ray only. And all I did was change the output size to 1024 by 683. So at this point, we should be ready to render, right? So to render a test image, make sure you're clicking the current viewport, in this case, the one showing your camera view. And there is a little, let's see here, teapot with a little, looks like a thunderbolt here. This is your render production. So I'm gonna click on this one and see what I get here. All right, so it's done. So why is my rendering completely black? Let's go through every step here and figure out why.
Is it you didn't set the sun or the lighting?
Exactly, yes. So at this point, there is no sun in the scene, so there's nothing for the camera to capture, right? So our next stage is we have to add a sun, right, to the scene. So let's go here again to the plus sign, and we have a little light bulb, right? That's our light, you know, whether it's a sun or artificial lights or spotlights, it's all here, right? And then we click in here and we have 4 different options: photometric, standard, V-Ray, and Arnold. We're gonna use, again, V-Ray lights. And we have, again, after we put V-Ray, we have 4 more options here. So we're gonna use the one called V-Ray Sun, right? So we'll click on V-Ray Sun, and I'm going to maximize now this viewport, the top one again, so we can see better. And just like the camera, you know, click on the sun, then click outside your scene, drag your mouse towards your scene, right? And then it will ask you for this. Would you like to automatically add a V-Ray sky? Yes, so always do it because V-Ray sky is your ambient light. The V-Ray sun is your direct light. So you wanna have those two combined. So this always hit yes. And then we get this, right? So this is where students make mistakes sometimes. So make sure the sun is pointing towards your scene because sometimes, you might add it backwards. So if you zoom close enough, you're gonna be able to see an arrow, right? This arrow is pointing. So this is the sun and the light is going in this direction. So in this case, the light is going to my scene, right? Not the other way. If you put the sun this way and point the other way, the light is going away from the scene. So make sure it's going in the right direction. Then again, this is the sun and that's the target. Right? The target is the direction where the sun is being cast. The next thing is just like the camera, when you add the sun to the scene, if I switch to let's say a frontal view, the sun is applied right on the horizon line. So completely flat on the ground, right? So being that, we might get some light, we might not get any light because the sun is completely at the horizon line. So I'm gonna move the sun here and I'm trying to get the sun, let's see, let me maximize this. So there's my camera. So I wanna get light on this side. So if it's shining this way, we're gonna get some shadows behind here and the camera's gonna see the actual shot. So let's take another test rendering here. Render production. Okay, we see something there, right? It looks a little bit, what's wrong with the scene now? Before it was black and now it's what?
It's too bright.
It's too bright, right? So, so we have our next thing that we need to fix. Before that, I'm gonna take my sun and click the back of the sun, right? Let me maximize this. Oops. And I'm gonna raise the sun in the sky, right? So, which is better, right? This is my sun and the light is coming down in our scene, right? For this, what 3D Max cares about is the sun angle, right? So for example, if I move the sun very close to my subject, right? The light is not going to change. It won't be brighter or darker, right? Even here, Max only will recognize the angle of the sun. So if the angle changes, how's the light going to affect the scene? Think about the sunrise, sunset, noon. How does the sunlight change throughout the day?
It'll get like more intense or less intense, and the shadows will be different.
Yes. So V-Ray sun automatically detects the angle, and it would change the intensity and the color of the sun. So if the sun is like this, very low to the ground, what type of light would I get?
Like a sunset or
Something like sunset, sunrise, and the light is more of a color, right? It's more like it could be pinkish, orange color, that tone. If the light is very high in the sun, you get a very bright yellow sun, right? So it's a very strong light source, right? Again, so the angle, how close it is, really makes no difference. What matters is the angle, and that angle will change the color of the sun and the intensity as you move it throughout the scene. So for now, I'm gonna do something like this, kind of something around 45 degrees. And let's try to test again the rendering here. All right, so again, before when there was no sun, it was underexposed, right? So that means there was no light, so it looked black. Now the sun is there, and now it's overexposed, right? So what do we need to correct now in our scene? We need to add what? Any guesses? So we have to correct the exposure of the scene, right? Right now it's overexposed, right? So we have to set up some type of parameters so it's not too dark or it's not too bright, right? So for that, we have to go here to where it says rendering, right? This should be the middle of your screen. And then go down to where it says exposure control, right? This tab. And we're gonna make a few changes here. So let's go over first of all the top ones here. So common parameters, right? You see here where it says environmental map, right? And it says default V-Ray sky, right? So when you added your V-Ray sun before, and it said, do you want to add the V-Ray sky? This is where it adds the sky, right? If I uncheck this box, it will turn off the V-Ray sky and it will default to a color, in this case black, meaning that it won't expose any light in the scene, right? But when this is being used, it's gonna give you a default V-Ray sky that's going to give you ambient light in the scene. All right, then down here, this is where it controls the exposure, right? So we're gonna change this setting to the last one where it says V-Ray exposure control. And then once you set this, go down to the next tab here to mode and change the mode to from V-Ray camera. Once you add those two options, the camera will be able to self-control the exposure, right? So it's not too bright or too dark. So if I close this now and I do render, would you get a better scene, right? Which it is, right? So we can see, again, the color of those simple shapes, right? We see the ground plane, we see shadows, and we see a default V-Ray sky, right? And this V-Ray sky, again, has no clouds. It's just simply a sky that has, it goes from white to blue. And as you look higher, it's gonna get into a much darker blue, right? And then once you see here, this is the horizon line, right? Below here, it just looks brown, right? And that means that there's nothing below that. So this way, eventually, you know, you're gonna have this built, right? Either a floor or something. So that will hide the ground plane. But for now, it gives you a visual cue that you can tell where is the ground line in my entire scene, right? And this blue sky is emitting light, right? It is giving you a very simple ambient light, right? So at this point, my scene has two lights. The sun that gives you my direct shadows, right? And my sky that gives me an ambient light that starts to, you know, give me an equal amount of light throughout the entire space.
This looks so much better than Rhino rendered.
Oh yeah?
Right, V-Ray for Rhino, yeah.
It's so much better than Rhino, yes. Even V-Ray in Rhino, it's, you know, it doesn't have as many features and it's not as good as, you know, 3D Max.
Yeah, the quality is very
Good. Yes, you know,
perfect.
eventually you guys will do amazing things. You know, once you get to things that are photorealistic, you see how, you know, how good this could look. Okay, so let's see here. Also, you see here in this viewport, right? Again, it looks kind of weird because the background looks black. So for a second, I'm gonna click here on this tab, the one that says default shading, and go down to where it says viewport background. I'm gonna make it a gradient color. So a gradient color, this gives me a better, it almost looks like the sky, you know, light gray, it's getting darker and darker to the sky. So it gives me a better sense of depth, right? If it's black, it gives it no, it looks like a very flat scene. So, all right, so we have a camera in our scene, right? At this point, once we address, you know, the rendering exposure control, then we can take properly, you know, we can take actual shots and we can record. So let's say that I like this shot over here, right? I can hit render, right? You're gonna see a few things now. First of all, if you look at the bottom left corner, right, of your screen, it's gonna tell you how long this rendering takes to complete, right? So right now, this very simple rendering is taking 10 seconds, right? And we're gonna see later as we add more and more detail, you know, as we add material, make it glossy, make it reflective, make it transparent, this time will increase, you know, little by little because it takes more time to render the entire scene. Once you have this rendering complete, then to save it is just here, right? This is the little save button here. Click save. Again, give it a JPEG file and save it in your folder, right? That's all. All right, so that's for that. That's good. We have camera, we have lights, we can already take renderings. So that means that now we can start looking at material lights. We can, you know, see how they work. Let me just switch here. So now I'm gonna keep this be top view. I'm gonna keep this as my left view. I'll keep this as my camera view. And this one here, I'm gonna make it my, I'm gonna change it to, let's see here, orthographic view. I'll hit F3 to make it a, you know, a shaded view. And I'll hit G to turn off my grid. So this becomes a view where I can quickly, you know, move around the space, you know, explore different things and such things. Okay, perfect. All right, so let's talk about Okay, a few more things here. Let's talk about how do we, let's say in a scene you have multiple things, right? Like right here we have, 1, 2, 3, we have, about 10 different elements in the scene, right? What happens if you want to focus on only one object, and be able to work more precisely? What would you typically do in other software?
Isolate.
Yes, exactly. Isolate, right? So if I click, let's say let's say this teapot, right? I want to focus here and I don't want to be confused by all the different elements, right? I'm going to click that teapot, right? Once I click it, I'll do a right click and this up here, isolate selection. So if I click here, then I'm seeing only the teapot, right? So now I can zoom in, I can focus, I can make a change, I can correct it. And when I'm done, again, right click it and do N isolate. I can click more than one element. I can click this element. I can click this sphere, this box. I'm doing this by holding down the control key. So I have now 3 things selected. Again, right click it, isolate, and we focus now on just those 3 things, right? When you're done, just click anywhere on the screen, right click it and do N isolate. That's a very quick way to focus on certain things. What else could you do also besides doing isolate? Think about how you do it in Rhino, I don't know, AutoCAD, other softwares.
Hide.
Exactly, you can hide different things, right? And there's different ways to hide. So this tab over here on the top right, it looks like a screen and it's called display, right? If you look at this tab here, we have in the middle here, hide different ways to achieve those things. We have hide selected, hide unselected, hide by name, hide by hit, unhide all, or unhide by name. So if I want to do hide by hit, so click on this, I can just hide, certain things as I click in. I can do here unhide all, bring everything back. I can do again hide by hit, and then I can do unhide by name. Right? So I'll get a little window here, and I can see everything that's currently hidden, and I can just, unhide certain things if I want to, right? Like the cylinder, or I can do unhide all. So this is a very quick way to, again, to work more precisely, to hide things. If you don't want to do isolate for a very quick fix, right? You're working here, click it, right click it, isolate, make a correction, right click it, and isolate, you're done. If you want to hide things for a long time, right, then use just a regular hide for these things. What else? So the next thing is, let's say that you want to combine these 2 things together, right? So whenever you move this one also moves, right? What is that called? Or I want to put these 4 things, right, into the same category and be able to move.
You group it.
Exactly. So grouping, again, is very simple. Let's say I want to group these 4 elements, right? I'm going to hold down the control key. I picked all 4. And if you go to the top left corner of your screen, we have the group tab, right? So you just click on group, right? And the first tab here is group, right? You can give it a name, right? Group 01, you can give it a custom name, do okay. So now when I click here on any object, right? They're all attached together, right? So we can always move them. And then what happens when you're done with the group? How do you reverse it?
Ungroup.
Yeah, so I'm gonna click it again, right? Go back to the same tab and do ungroup, right? And then it's gonna go back to, again, those 4 individual elements. Okay, how are we doing, guys? Am I going too fast, or are you guys, okay?
So far, so good.
I'm sorry?
So far, so good.
One second. So let's see what can we do next. So we have already camera, we have lights, and we have a basic understanding of grouping, hiding, and isolating different elements. And we can already render, so we can already document our process. So I think we can start to, at this point, jump in to looking at, basic materials, right? So let's talk about materials for a second. So where do I find a material, first of all? Where do I get it from? How does a mapping work?
Find the picture.
Exactly, it relies on a photo or a picture, right? Something that is going to apply to an element, right? So let's see here. So I'm going to, let me stop sharing this. I'll share something else. Let's go to share my browser here. You see here probably my, Chrome browser, right? So what do I search for here, right? I can do, let's say we're doing brick, right? Brick material, right? But what's very important to find with a brick material, right? Or any material, right? You cannot input certain keywords, right? So what else should I be adding here? See if you guys can, you might know it,
PNG.
Seamless.
Exactly.
Texture.
Yeah, so you can do, you see, I'll get already some, thing. But ideally, anything you search for should be something that is seamless, right? You could add texture if you want. So I'll do brick material, or you can do, yeah. And then we'll do afterwards tools, right? Size and large, because I want to have a really good quality material. All right, so we get this, right? Okay, so let's say this one here, I know this one is free, so it's 5,000 by, well, let's click on it, see if it works. No, okay. All right, let's try. Again, some of these might have like a watermark, but that's fine, for the class. Eventually, I'll give you guys something that is more detailed, right? And I'll give you guys some of my own material so you guys don't have to worry about, watermarks. But for now, again, this is definitely seamless, and that's why, many companies obviously will charge you to buy their, materials. And there's, again, I'll give you guys a nice library afterwards for you guys to keep. For now, let's just find something online, imagining that you don't have access to any material. And we'll go through the steps of doing this. This one looks interesting, but a little blurry. That one doesn't look like it's seamless. But again, let's look at something that is seamless, something that is not. So let's do a couple of things, right? Okay, so let me remove here material. I'm gonna do brick seamless texture. Okay, we get this one. All right, better. So I'm gonna right click on this one. I'm gonna save the image, and I'm gonna save this image into your, for now, your folder. So I'll go to course, fall 2020, Friday class, your folder. I'm gonna put it on course material. I'm just gonna drop it here. And we call this brick seamless, right? And save it. Okay. Let's find a couple other materials here that we can use. Let's try also concrete, something that has a pattern. That one looks pretty good. So I'm gonna take this one, save image as, we call this again, concrete seamless. I'm saving this, what else can we use? Wood, right? Let's try something that's a wood plank. So that's like a pattern, right? So again, wood plank. What can we find here? Interesting. I mean, it seems like a good size, 2,000 by 2,000, but it's not loading properly. So it means when I click here, it's gonna ask me to probably, buy something. So I don't wanna, do that for now. Let's see, let's try. This one doesn't look too bad. That one looks pretty good. So let's try this one here. I'm gonna take this one and I'll do right click it, save image, and we called it a wood plank. Okay, what else can we use? Give me some typical materials that we can use, What else do we have as typical materials? Wood, concrete.
Steel.
What's that?
Steel.
Steel, okay, steel, that would do a different way. So steel, it could rely, steel doesn't really have a texture, right? It's just an element, right? But something that has a pattern, right? Let's say. So let's try with something like like a tile, right? So let's try, okay, let's try seamless. Let's try, marble, seamless texture, right? So, okay, marble is a very typical material, and marble could be very glossy, right? Or it could be, a matte or a home finish. So let's do marble tile because I want a pattern like this. Good. Now we're just gonna find something that looks interesting. That one technically looks pretty good, 3,000, but again, we go to the same site. Let's see, yeah, if I click here, I see it's gonna give me a watermark. So for now, let's just find something that doesn't have watermark. Watermarks, that's not really a real material. This is where, it might take time, it gets a little tricky finding something. I mean, it used to be a lot easier before. Now, everyone puts watermarks on materials and, they don't give you guys any more free stuff. Even that has, again, some of those watermarks, we could technically take them out in Photoshop, but that's, it would take some time. Okay, I just want something simple. That appears to work, it's a very ugly tile, but it appears to be seamless, right? So, all right, let's try this one here. I'm gonna do a save image as, and we'll call it a seamless tile. Okay, so that gives a good amount of material there to use, right? Let's see what else we have. Something with this. Okay, for now, if we need more, we can always come back and get more. All right, let's go back to 3D Max. So how do we make a material? How do we apply it? How do you apply to say, if you apply something in Rhino, do you guys, it shouldn't be such a different, strategy.
Isn't it the teapot?
Yes, I mean, in a way, you have to define, so once you find a material, that material is considered your diffuse map, right? Diffuse map is the one that controls the main material and the one that shows the actual photograph of your, of your brick or your concrete or, whatever you're trying to use. So actually, before I go to that part, let's finish setting up our V-Ray settings, right, to our scene. All right, so let's go back here to the render setup, right? And right now we'll make some basic settings so that we can get some quick renderings because again, the settings here could be more advanced and they have some very high settings that you probably will never need. So it's good to have, to find settings that don't take up too much time to render and will still give you a nice quality, image. So on the first tab here in common, really all we have here is the output size, Vista Vision, and we're gonna use 1024 by 683. That's all, we're not making any other change there. Under V-Ray, the next tab here, we're going to just make sure that where it says here, image sampler, it's set to progressive, right? It should be there by default, but just double check that it says progressive. That's the only change under V-Ray. And then GI is our most important tab. What does GI stand for? Can someone guess?
Global illumination.
Exactly, right? So it stands for global illumination. So this is what V-Ray relies on. It relies on light bounds, and we can define, a very precise light bounds. We can define, a very simple one, depending on the complexity of our scene, right? Or if our scene has too much light or very little light. So we're gonna click on GI, and we're gonna make a couple of changes here. So make sure it says enable GI, and then we have primary and we have secondary engine. That's what creates the precise light bounds in your scene. Change the first one from brute force to light cache. Sorry, to irradiance map. The second one, leave it as light cache. So we have these two rendering engines. Once you set those, you're gonna see they have two tabs below here, one for each one. The first one, irradiance map, change the current preset from high to very low, right? Very low is still a very good setting, and I've never had to go to high or medium. Very low seems to work very well always. So leave it as very low. Last one, light cache, that controls the subdivisions for light bound. So the more elements you have for subdivisions, the more precise the light's going to be, right? So for now, we have a really, really basic scene, right? So just drop it down to 500. So what this does really is, if your scene has a lot of light, that means it could be on the exterior and the sun's is very bright, then we don't need to have much subdivisions. If you're working on something inside where there's very little light, then you want to increase subdivisions. So this way the computer can read more light bounds. Otherwise, you might get a scene that looks very grainy or noisy. Imagine when you take a photograph and you have very little light, right? That photograph is not really sharp or clear. There's like little dots. So the more you have here, the more light you're going to be able to extract from that scene. So right now our scene is, again, imagine outdoors. We have a blue sky, direct sunlight, so there's plenty of light there. So 500 is more than enough to get a nice image. So once you make those changes, just close it. There's no other things to change at this time. Okay. So let's make our first material, right? So there's different ways to get there. So I can type the M key to bring up my material tab, or I can go up here, right, to the material editor. It should be next to the render setup always. So click on here. And I'm getting this setting, but in your case, when you open for the first time, you will get this one here. It's gonna call Slate Material Editor. So yours will look like this. Once you get this, this panel, just go to Modes and change to Compact Material Editor. This one will give you the little spheres here. And I think it's easier to be able to preview all your materials at one time. All right, so once we have this here, again, this really might be a little bit like Rhino. You're gonna have different spheres, right? Those are there to preview your materials. It has some presets already made here, so some, basic materials, but those materials are not V-Ray, so they're not going to work in this scene, right? I can go up and down here. And you see down here, it says, these are all physical materials, right? So for our scene, this must say V-Ray, right? Otherwise, it will not function. So just go to the top left, so this is your beginning sphere, right? The top most left corner. And we're gonna change the type of material. So click where it says physical. And we're gonna look for V-Ray. So here's V-Ray tab, right? And there's a bunch of different options. So click on the one that says V-Ray MTL. That's your basic V-Ray material. It's gonna be your default material to start doing anything else. So V-Ray MTL, double click it. It's gonna load a very simple gray sphere. And you're gonna see down here, it says now V-Ray, right? So we know that we're in the right track with the material. Once you make your material or any material, what's the first thing you should always do? Any guesses?
Pick the objects you want to apply material to.
All right, that'll be a few steps later, but the first thing is always give it a name, right? Because all these things, have 0, 1 defaults, 0, 2 defaults, 0, 3 default. Again, eventually you might have 20 materials, right? So you don't want to get confused with a basic name. So our first one is gonna be brick. So I'm gonna call this brick, right? Not rock, right? So that I know that I'm making a brick material, right? So first thing is give it a name, right? For now, we're gonna ignore these parts and we'll come back if we have time later. Okay, let's keep going down here. Go all the way down to where it says maps, right? Down here. That's where I can start to assign diffuse maps to our scene, right? And we have a lot of options, right? We have a lot of different slots here that we can add the material. We are never gonna use all of them at the same time. Maybe we'll use 3 at the most, maybe 4, but no need to use everything ever. So the first one is the one called diffuse, right? Diffuse is your original material that gives you the quality. So in this case, here's where I put my brick material. So under no map, click on that. Again, we have a bunch of things here. Under general, which is down here, click on bitmap. Bitmap is where you go to find that photograph of the brick. Click there, and then again, you're gonna have to go to your, in my case, I have to go to my Dropbox folder, courses, fall 2020, Friday class, and I put everything in your, for now, I give you guys the same material. So under number 4, course material, I have here my brick, concrete, and this one's a mistake. You see it has a black bar here. I didn't notice that, so I'll have to correct that in Photoshop. And we have a wood plank over here, right? Okay, so that one, I might just copy one other one afterwards. 1 second, let's see here. It looks like they're getting very tricky. They're adding all these black boxes at the bottom, so this way it gives you more work to try to fix these things. But I'm just gonna copy something from before. Okay, perfect.
All right, Professor, can you go back to the, you selected no map on which one?
I'm sorry, you're a little bit broken up.
On genetic map.
Where it is
Where
again.
do you choose no map?
Go here. Output, right? Sorry, not to here. Go back. Here, right? You go to diffuse map, right? And you click in here, right? So let me again take it out again. Let me just, I'm going to take it out, right? So now we have a no map again, right? So I'm gonna click on no map, right? And here we have a bunch of tabs, but go to the one that says general, right? Under general, the second one is called bitmap, right? That's where you go to find your photograph, right? So I'm gonna click on bitmap, and I'm gonna go to my folder and select that material. Sorry, here. So I'm gonna pick this one here, the one called brick, right? So double click that. You're gonna see that this now has the material applied to it, right? And this window also changed, right? This is the window now that controls that individual material. So if I go to this tab over here that says go to parent, that goes back to the previous window, which is the one that has the maps right here. So when I click inside here, now we get a new window where we have things that control only that material, right? And that will cover it later on. But for now, what we have here is, if you look down here on the diffuse, we have map brick seamless applied to this, right? So if I double click on the sphere, I can always make it bigger, right? Double clicking on the sphere will blow up this viewport, right? And give you a better preview, right? But again, this preview, it's a real-time preview. So once the material gets to be more advanced, like it's glossy or it's transparent, it will make your computer slow because it will eat up all your memory. So it could slow down the computer. It could crash it if it's if it's not that fast. I'm doing it right now very big here so you guys can see it better, in your screens. And it's just a matter of just double clicking this, right? So we see here now we have a nice material shown here, right? You see also here on the diffuse, it's a little checkbox. If I uncheck this box, I'm just gonna turn off the material, and I can put it back on again afterwards. All right, so we have now our first very simple basic material, right? So now how do I apply the material to the scene? Let's say that I want to apply it to this element. How do I apply it?
You drag and drop.
Yes, that's one way. There's two ways you can apply it. You can, and right now it's drag and drop is easy because our scene is very simple, right? If we have, a lot of objects, then drag and drop could be confusing, right? Because you might not be able to pick precisely an object, or we could just take this, drag it, and drop it, right? Or we can just select the object, right? And go to here and apply it to selection, right? Same thing. So for now, I'm gonna take it, drag it, and drop it, right? The box change color is now gray instead of purple, right? And that's because we have to set this tab over here, right? So this tab says show material in viewport, right? If I click here, it's gonna give me a preview of that material in the viewport. Otherwise, if that is off, your computer is trying to save memory, right? So turn it on, and okay, there it is. It looks bad, right? What's wrong with this material?
The size is not
Yes, that's
correct.
So the next thing is we have to tell this box how to treat the material, right? How to react to it. So we're gonna, the next thing is we're gonna click in the box, right? So the block should look blue, right? We're going to go to the properties, right? Again, this tab over here, right? Again, here we're gonna see the box name, the box length, width, height, but there'll be also a tab up here that says modifier list, right? And a little arrow pointing here. So these are modifiers that we can apply to this individual box. So I'm gonna apply 2 modifiers, right? One that can be found all the way down, and it's called UVW map. What this does is it tells the material how to apply itself to this box, depending on the shape, right? And we have planar, cylindrical, spherical, shrink and wrap, box, and face, you know. So which of these shapes most closely resembles our object?
Box.
Yes. Again, they won't always be the same, you know, but you gotta find one that is most closely resembles. All right, so now it knows that it's a box-looking shape. The next modifier will tell it how to scale it. So if you go down to map scaler right there, see, it's now it assigned it properly. And the last thing here is now we can control the scale, right? So we can go up and down to control the scale of the material. And we can work, if I zoom in here very closely, right? These ones here allow me to slowly move it right, to make a fix, or up and down to kind of get a better alignment of the material on my scene, right? So there we have a brick material, right? Very simple. And now we can, you know, do something like, you know, do a rendering and see what it looks like. So I go back to my rendering. And there's my brick, you know, in this case, a seamless brick material, right? So now that we see this, why is seamless such an important thing?
So that you can see like the material better and it won't have like noticeable breaks.
Exactly. So yeah. So I mean, that's, you know, when I look at student renderings, the biggest mistake, you know, is, again, they might have a beautiful model, but when they apply the material, if it's not seamless, what's going to happen to the rendering? It's going to look like what? It's going to look fake, right? Because our eye can very easily detect, you know, a pattern, right? So we can see this repeats multiple times. So let's try to apply to the one next door something that is not seamless, right? So, all right, so I need to make a new material. Oops, 1 second. All right. I need to make a new material over here, right? So do I have to go through every step again as before? Go here, V-Ray, find those things, or can you find a way to save time?
Duplicate the first one.
Exactly. So I'll go to the first one and drag and drop here, right? But now we have 2 of them with the same name, right? So the second thing you do is change the name, right? So brick, let's make it not seamless, right? Simple name. So again, you're gonna be always duplicating materials because it saves you a lot of time, right? Sometimes, you know, you might have more advanced settings and you don't wanna go back and, again, make everything from scratch. So don't forget to always change the name. Otherwise, if this material is brick and this is, let's say, concrete and they have the same name, then when you go to render, it might be concrete, it might be brick. You never know, right? So it won't be a precise rendering. All right, so we have now brick, not seamless. I can just go back here to diffuse, right? And the good thing is now this material is already linked to the correct folder. So I can just click here and go to the material address, right? And I can just pick, and I just put one there called basic brick. It's pretty much it's not a seamless brick material. So I'm gonna click this one here. Again, all this is in your folder, so you can always test it out afterwards. So basic brick, right? So here it is, you know, here it looks pretty good because it's applied to a very small sphere, right? It doesn't give you a large area, but let's look at it, you know, once applied to this, right? So I'm gonna click this again, right? Click this and drop it here, right? So there's no need to press it because it should already be done automatically. If you don't see the color here, then just click here and show material on viewport. Let's just, All right, so let's try to, again, save time, right? Again, once you have here the material, I would have to go here, right? And apply UV map, right? And then go back and apply map scalar, right? So how can we save time again? We can do again, drag
Copy
and
the, copy the first box and then just replace the image.
okay, or we can, if you go back to this one here, right? I'm gonna click on my other one, right? And that one already has loaded these two elements, right? UV map and map scale. So I'm gonna take this one here, right? Drag it and drop it here. It applied to that one. Then I'm gonna go back to this one again. I'm gonna take this one, drag it and drop it here, right? So it just applied those two settings. And now when I go to this one, it has those two. When I go to this one, it has the same two applied together. Make sure that you apply UV map first and map scalar second. All right, so here, I mean, it doesn't look too bad here because, you know, our wall, our box is very small. But if I were to go to this box and I change the size of the box, let's go here to box, right? So it's 6 by 6 by 20. So let's say if I do, oh, let's change the length here. Let's make it wider, right? Okay, like that. So again, it doesn't look that bad actually there, but if I change the scale to a little smaller, we should be able to start to notice something, right? It's not too bad, but we can see that certain parts here repeat multiple times, right? And the smaller the map gets, again, if this was a very big wall and we got, you know, very small, then now we can really see pattern, right? And that's the thing that you want to always try to eliminate, because again, once you see it, you know, then you can tell that it's a fake, you know, rendering, and you know, it throws off all your hard work. So again, if this thing was much bigger, it might look good, but again, depends how you apply it. You know, it's a very large wall or a very small segment. It could work, or you know, or might look strange. So for now, you know, we see that, you know, this it's a very, you know, bad pattern. This one here is not bad. I mean, this is not also, it's not perfect. If I click here and I make it smaller, if I make it really small, then, you know, we might see a very clear pattern, right? We can see the repeats here multiple times, right? And some of these things, you know, will, again, depending on the scale, when I go bigger, it looks better. There's still some amount of repetition here, very minimal. And those things, you might see them when you render, you might not. So, you know, your next task would be to do a test rendering and see what it looks like, right? I'm gonna move my camera, let's say here. For now, I'm gonna take this sphere. Let's see here. Okay, so you see how I made a mistake before? I can't click on this sphere. What did I do here? I can click that one, I can click this one, but I must have, I know what I did, but I want to see if you guys can. So why can't I touch this sphere?
I think you copied it, as in, it's like the wrong copy, right?
No, I mean, it's still a copy, right? You see that also, well, yeah, I did copy from a copy, that's fine. But what would cause me not to be able to select an object?
Is locked.
Yes. So if you look on the left side, you know, I must have accidentally locked this sphere, right? You see how it's frozen, right? So this is sphere 4, and we have a little, looks like it's a snowflake, right? So if I click on here, then, so pretty much anything that is frozen will lose the color, right? So for example, if I click on this box, right? That's box number 18, right? When I click on freeze, it becomes gray, right? So that's how I know that something is frozen, right? It will lose the material and it will turn gray. So if that happens to you, just check on the left side and make sure that nothing here is frozen for your object. So in this case, I don't want to freeze it, I want to hide it. So I'm going to click on this one and just go back to the display tab on the top right corner and just do hide selected so that I can do a better rendering here without having to see that sphere. All right, so let's look at that and let's render again. I mean, it doesn't look that bad, you know, at all. I mean, again,
You can see the difference, yeah.
I mean, eventually the material is going to get more advanced, right? Right now, again, this is just a material and we haven't applied anything, again, to make it better, you know, things like a bump, right? once you put a bump, you know, it can start to hide the non-seamless quality, because a bump is going to extrude part of the material, so it might look actually better. You saw also our time went now to 12 seconds. So we just gained 2 seconds on our rendering time. All right, not too bad now, but eventually, you know, it could be 2 hours extra. So for now, let's do another basic material. So let's go to material, right? And I'm gonna drag and copy this one here. And let's use the one called wood. Give it a name, right? Let's go down here, go on diffuse, go to the file location, and I'm gonna pick this one here, the wood plank seamless. There it is. Okay, so it's a nice looking material. And let's just apply it to something, right? Let's try this wall here. So again, when I click on this object, right, and I go here to the properties, it already has these two elements. So once I apply new material, those things still remain, right? There's no need to apply them again. Those will you only have to apply if it's a brand new object that you've never applied anything in the past. So if I apply here, I can just click on the material, drag it, drop it, right? And I can right away start playing here with the scale, right? So this is not technically seamless, right? Or it depends how you view it, you know, how big it is. You can see a very close line here of where the material repeats multiple times, right? But it, you know, it's close enough for now. We can see the mapping. So the main thing is, you know, everything's mapping, you know, correctly here, there. There's no strange areas that are mapped. All right. So let me go to display mode and unhide all. All right, let's try to map this brick to this sphere, right? So I'm gonna click on the sphere, click on the brick, and do apply. Okay, so that doesn't look too bad. Because it's a new object, we have to go to modify, and we'll go to UVW map. In this case, which element am I going to use or mapping parameter?
Spherical.
Let's put spherical here, and then we go to map scalar. This will be kind of easier because it'll be a lot of repetition. So map scalar, right? And we get a nice, you know, we can always see higher, go smaller, right? I mean, again, brick is not meant to be applied to a sphere. So as I go higher, you might see mistakes, right? It's at one point it's you know, it's things don't align anymore. So it only works properly, you know, up to some point when it's smaller, right? Like here. There's still some parts here that don't align well. Obviously, some parts here are gonna look strange because, but overall, it's not really that bad of a, you know, an option. If I take again this material and I'm going to apply the wood one, same thing, right? At this point, it will stretch it through the whole material, and I can just do right-click it and isolate, so we can really focus here. So I mean, it looks pretty good. Again, we can apply the UVW map. Again, spherical, and we'll do map scalar. Okay, and it's not bad at all. I mean, it has a nice circle, right? I mean, you have to look really close to find a mistake here. Again, these things you might not see. And again, you probably would not apply this material to this type of shape, right? When I'm done, right-click it and isolate. Oops, wrong one. Okay, here we go. And then we have, again, these shapes. So again, I can take this cylinder. Let's take, again, the brick. The top looks definitely very strange, right? And that's because, again, we have to go to UVW map and apply cylindrical with a cap, right? So I will map the top one also. And then we can do map scalar. Let's see here. Here. And that looks a little better. We can then play around with the scale of this. So again, you can really map it to some things, you know. Then we get to these shapes, right? So again, some materials are not meant to be mapped to certain elements. Obviously, a box, a spherical thing, a cylindrical shape. Technically, those materials could work. Something like this, you know, a teapot, if I apply brick, you can apply it, right? It gets mapped differently in different parts of the object because of the stretching. So if I go here and I do again UVW map, right? There really is no shape for this, right? It's not planar, it's not cylindrical, it's not spherical. Shrink and wrap maybe, box, face, and XY. So I'm gonna try shrink and wrap. Planar. It could be cylindrical. I mean, most of the shape is spherical. Some things look weird. So, I mean, there's not really, I would just try, let's try cylindrical and see what it looks like. Cap, all right, cap seems to create something there. And then we'll do we'll do map scalar. Okay, and that seems to be okay, not bad. I mean, this looks okay, that looks okay, but we have definitely problems when it comes to here, right? That just cannot be mapped, you know. Some objects, you know, that have a pattern cannot be properly mapped to here. So even if I make it bigger, it's going to just be heavily distorted here. So yeah, so I mean, again, we wouldn't really apply to this at all. And you see how when I move it, it's taking time. The computer is thinking how to apply it to it. Actually, it is slowing down my computer. And it's have a pretty fast computer. So I mean, it is really definitely struggling to map it to something this complex. And same thing with this, you know, element over here. So again, this I wouldn't map something like this, you know, it just wouldn't really work out. Okay, and again, this is just to get a very basic material, right? Which you're relying on just only one factor, which is pretty much just a diffuse map, right? That's here. So a diffuse map is controlling what the element looks like, whether it's brick or wood or, you know, this thing here. There's no other factor. So this is not really something realistic, right? This is a very simple material and so what does a real material need to have? So what am I missing here from this material? What do I need to achieve to make it look realistic? What do you guys? What else?
Is it texture?
Yes, texture, which could be like a bump, right? Right. And what else? So materials, you know, could be reflective, right? That means they're a little bit glossy, right? Some could be transparent, some could be a matte finish, and some could have different types of bumps, right? So right now, this is missing everything, right? This is just a map. I mean, it looks pretty good in some parts of the scene. The light shines pretty well. We can tell, but we are definitely missing reflective qualities of the material, bumpiness, and those things that will make it really look, you know, realistic. So again, this is just kind of the first stage, you know, just learning basic application of materials, you know, and again, this could be done for any material, right? You can find any map online, whether it's seamless or not, you can map it, right? It might look good, it might look bad, but the process will not change. You apply the material, and then to the actual elements, you apply a UV map to control how it gets mapped, and then you apply a scalar to control the size of the object. Those things will never change, right? So that's pretty simple, right? Let me look at I'm gonna take this sphere and I'm gonna copy it to here. And it's a copy, right? So it's 9:54, okay. Well, time flies in this class. Are you guys okay? Should I keep going?
Yes.
Anything to read at this point? Anything to explain again? Okay, I'll take silence as being okay. All right, so let's leave those elements for now as they are. We'll come back to those and give it more detail eventually. But let's now switch over to a very simple, more complex material, which means something that is just glossy, right? For now, it has no bump, right? It has no texture. Imagine car paint, right? A very glossy surface, right? So we're gonna make glossy paint, right? Let's say that. So let's go back to the material, right? I'll go to down here, right? Make sure that you check here. In this case, is the wrong material. So click on physical, go to V-Ray, And I'm gonna load again a default V-Ray material. I'm gonna make it bigger so you guys can see here. And I'm going to do only one thing, make it glossy, nothing more. So let's look at the first tab over here. You see here where it says diffuse, right? We have a color, right? So if I click here on the color, we can change the color of the diffuser. So I can make it pink, right? Or I can make it red, right? And we get this color, right? There's a tab next to it here, right? This tab, let's go back to this one here. So this one, that's break, right? The break one here, you see how when I go to diffuse, there's an M, right? Why do you think there's an M here? What does the M mean?
Mac.
Means map, right? Yes, exactly. So again, we have also diffuse, right? If I go here and diffuse and I make it red, nothing happens, right? At all, right? That's because, you know, once you see an M here, that overrides this color. And the M is here because if you go down here, right, diffuse is being controlled by material, right, a map. So that means that if we ever see an M, down here or between any of those, you know that something down there is controlling material, right? In this case, and with this sphere, there's no M, right? That means that whatever color I put here will be the color that I'll see in my element, right? So at this point, you know, I could make it red. I could click on the sphere, drag it, drop it. We get a red ball, right? Let me move my camera so we can do a rendering there. Okay, so we can see everything. Okay, let me render this one over here. Do it step by step. Okay. So at this point, you know, we have a red sphere, right? Right now, that's all. It has no other quality than it's just red. How do I make it glossy? Let me close this. So this tab one here, the basic parameter that controls the color, or controls, if there's an M, controls the material, right? The second one, the second tab here, called reflect, that's what controls the glossiness of the material. So I'm going to double click on this one. And the first tab here, right, where it says reflect, we see the color black. I'm gonna click here, right? And we have a scale of, again, we can pick any color here, but in this case, for glossiness, we deal only from black to white, nothing more. So if it's black, it means that it has no glossiness, right? And as we go lower and lower, as we go more towards white, you see here, right? It becomes more and more glossy, right? I'm going more, right? You see that we can see some amount of glossiness here, right? All the way to the bottom, right? But when I go all the way to the bottom, right? What happens to the, so let's see, so something very glossy, again, could be painted, you know, paint, or a very smooth surface, or like a very glossy piano finish, right? Like in a grand piano. It's a very super glossy paint, you know, very smooth finish. So you can control pretty much any level of glossiness from this bar, right? If we go all the way to white, right? White means 100% reflective, right? At that point, it's no longer paint, right? So let's do a test over here, right? So let's go back to reflect here, and let's just start, you know, black means no reflection. So let's do a little bit gray. Do okay, close this. You see that we see a little dot over here, right? Let's render, because again, this will not give us a preview. We have to render to see the actual. So do we see something glossy? Can you guys see okay? Like the,
Yeah,
right, what is this dot over here?
the sun.
Yeah, that's the sun in the sky, right? Okay, perfect. And you see now this thing is still rendering. So let it finish, see how long it takes. So all we did was make it glossy. So now I went to 27 seconds, right? So anything glossy is gonna take more time to render because there's more light bounce in the scene. And now it's trying to figure out all those different reflections within its own shape. All right, so let's go again to material, right? And let's make it a little bit more glossy. So in this case, let's go middle here, middle of the white. Let's render again. But before, this is where you have to save time, you know. I could hit render here, and it's gonna render the entire scene again. But again, that could waste time for me because I only wanna see this sphere, right? So what I could do here is, you see in the top left corner where it says view, I'm gonna pick region. And we get this little red box here. So this way, I can assign it. I can say, I want to render only this piece, right? And not worry about those things at this point. This way, it will save you time because you're not trying to focus on the entire scene, right? So you should be able to see that it does get a bit more glossy, right? Okay, let's keep going here. Material. Let's make it, okay. Let's keep going all the way to white. And let's see what happens. Okay, so now it's super reflective, right? The sphere. So you can control those parameters, right? If I change the color of the sphere, let's say, sorry. Yeah, this is what I'm doing next. Do you see this tab over here, which is called Fresnel reflection, right? This will be turned on by default, you know. And in a way, that was my mistake not to say it before, but this doesn't give you the ultra glossy effect you want. This tab you select when you're making a material that is not super reflective. You know, it could be a little bit glossy, or it could be glossy with a little bit of matte finish. So almost like a sandblasted finish. So it is glossy, but it's not a perfectly smooth, you know, surface, right? So watch what happens. I'm gonna again go back to black, right? Which means no reflection. I'm going to uncheck this one. So this one should always be unchecked for anything that is super glossy. All right, let's go back to black here and let's make it low, right? You see how this preview now, it looks very different, right? Look what happens when I turn on Fresnel. It is glossy, right? But it's not ultra glossy as turning it dissolve, right? So if I render now the sphere with that setting, so before when I had it on, the sphere became glossy, but it was always red, you know. So as the sphere becomes more and more glossy, the color should start to change, right? Why is that?
The reflectivity.
Exactly. So I mean, right now the sky is blue, right? So we're gonna see more blue showing up here, right? So if I make it again more reflective, let's go more towards white. Let's render again. The color starts to disappear because as the object becomes more reflective, it's becoming what?
More like a mirror.
Exactly. So if I make it completely reflective, I go back to reflect and I go all the way to white, right? My material just became this, right? There's no more color, right? Because anything that is 100% reflective, again, this could be pink, red, doesn't matter because you made now a different material. You made what? Which material is 100% reflective?
A mirror.
A mirror, yes. So let's take this one here and drag it here, right? And I'm gonna call it mirror, right? So we just made a mirror finish. This one here, I'm going to lower the reflection quality. So we don't have to go, and I'm gonna make it something in the gray. So it's reflective, right? But not so reflective, right? So let's take, for example, this sphere, right? And let's apply the, this one here. So again, you see that even though I applied it, it's still red, right? But because the quality is so reflective, the red becomes, obviously it doesn't matter. So what you could do here is just change the diffuse color and make it something like, you know, like a gray tone here. So it's not so distracting. So when I render here, oops. So in this case, let me remove the, make it render view. So let's be rendering the entire scene. All right, so there we have now two things, right? A very glossy sphere, right? Which is red, and something that could represent chrome, right? Steel, right? Depending how it's polished. So a very nice reflective, you know, surface. All right, perfect. So let's keep expanding on this over here. So I'm going to make another change here. Let's take these two spheres, copy them to the front. Copy, let's change the scale of them. So we can compare a modification of the material. All right, let's make it like that. All right, let me maximize this view. Okay, so this is glossy, right? That's mirror finish. Those are the same thing, right? So let's see how else we can modify the material to make it a bit more precise. So I'm gonna move down here, right? So I can see more tabs, right? So this one is called, so let's give it a nice name. Let's call this gloss red. Again, this could be gloss pink, green, doesn't matter. You can make it any color you want. This is called mirror, perfect. So let's just move down here. I'm gonna copy this one here. And let's just take out the gloss and make it matte, right? So what does a matte material have? What makes it look more matte finish? Anything or, all right, let's see.
Non-glossy.
Okay, yeah. It means the surface is more rough, right? It's not so, perfectly smooth, right? So again, make sure that this one has the same material, right? So if I were to run out the render, then it'll be the same glossiness for these two, right? And the reason why I copied the material to here is because I want to make a change to this one so we can see the difference, right? So this one, as we have it right now, is red. The reflect is somewhere in the charcoal gray. And that's it, it makes for a nice glossy sphere. The one down here, we're gonna make a change. We'll leave the reflect in the same place, something in the charcoal gray. We're gonna turn on Fresnel here, right? So you see how it changed. This starts to reflect more the environment, and this is just glossy. It doesn't reflect the environment. So let's see if that makes a difference between the two spheres. And it does, right? You can see that one sphere remains red, right? While still reflecting the environment. And this one will change color because it reflects more of the environment. So if there's more blue, it's gonna look more blue, right, in the sphere. But it's still, still glossy, right? So the next thing here is we have the tab underneath reflect called glossiness here, right? A number of 1 means a perfectly smooth surface, right? There's no imperfections, it's just super smooth to the touch, right? But what happens as we lower that number? So I'm gonna blow up this one here. You see that we have this thing that mimics, the reflection, right? So if I make it, let's say 0.9, what starts to happen? 0.8. Do you see a difference? 0.7. So the light is more spread out, right? Because if the surface is not perfectly smooth, the light's gonna bounce more and it's gonna be more spread out through the whole sphere, right? So I'm sorry?
How do you get the sample on the right side?
I just put here 0.7 under glossiness. Is that what you were?
The sample image. The sample image.
I just double.
Yeah, that one.
I just double click on the sphere.
Okay.
So you can double click on any one here. We'll just maximize it right on here. Just be careful. Don't make it too big because it does slow down the computer quite a lot. All right. So
I just did that.
Yeah. Especially if it's glossy, it could even crash the computer. All right, so I'll make it this one, matte red, bigger. You see that 0.7 gives me a very, and you see a slight bump, right, being shown here, right? So if I go to render again, the scene, it should be a significant difference between this sphere and this one here. You see when the surface is perfectly smooth, right, and very glossy, the sun appears like a dot, right? So it's like perfectly reflected. When the surface is more like a matte finish, what happens to the sun? It becomes more dispersed, right? So, and again, if I want to make this area be bigger, right, I would need to lower the size of the glosses. So right now it's 0.7. If I make it 0.6, it's a little smaller. Again, the lower you go with the number, the more it's going to take to render, because it becomes more complex to render the scene. So if I render again this scene, see now the light is much more softer and more spread out through the whole sphere. Right? So we can tell that it is a it is a matte finish. We don't see any other reflection of other elements here, because the light, as it hits the sphere, it gets bounced around into a surface that is not smooth, and it creates, so this is more like it could be a piece of plastic, it could be a matte finish paint, right? It could be a number of different things, right? But you can see how these two elements change the effect, right? Then same thing here with the mirror one. So if I copy the mirror here, right, to the bottom, right, and let's do mirror, it's called also matte finish here, right? And I'm going to take this sphere here and apply this one. Let's make the same change again, right? Let's put Fresnel, right? And let's put here, I don't know, 0.7, right? So it became something like this. And now let's render this. So in that case, you know, Fresnel really has very little effect on something like this, you know. And I'm going for something like a metallic object, because imagine like a sandblasted chrome looking finish, right? In this case, the mirror effect is completely lost, right? Because I kept on Fresnel reflections. But if I turn off Fresnel and I still keep it as 0.7, right? Watch what happens. So we still keep the quality of the mirror finish, but now it's a rough surface. So we still see the, you know, this thing here, and this could be some type of metal, you know, stainless steel, chrome. It could be a certain finish, how it's, you know, sandblasted finish. But we could achieve a metallic looking metal, even aluminum could be and that could be just a matter of, you know, you deciding what it looks like. Right now it's set to 0.7, right? We could do just, you know, 0.8, right? A little less. I'm gonna do region. And let's do just half of the sphere. So 0.7 gives you a little bit more clarity, right? But it's still, you know, a very more rough looking finish, you know, unlike a very perfectly smooth finish, right? Are you guys okay?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So I mean, again, it might seem complex, you know, you might have to go back to the video again, but you know, once you get those settings, you know, it starts to become pretty simple, right? To be able to, you know, create those things, right? All right, so we have those things already made. Let's see, it's 10:13. You guys need a break?
Yes, please.
Yes, okay. All right, so I mean, again, let's take a 15-minute break, okay? Come back around, you know, before 10:30, right? And then we'll finish a few more things with the materials, right? And then we'll, you know, let you guys go. So yeah, let's come back before 10:30. And I'll keep recording, just we have one video for the whole class.
I have a question.
Sure.
I think you might have took me off your email list because I couldn't get into the class this morning. I didn't get an email.
Really? Okay. So did somebody send you over invite?
Yeah, I asked Eduardo.
I mean, one thing I noticed before is that some of my emails were going to the students' trash folder. And that happened if you had because I'm using my Gmail account, which works better for these things. So he found out that all my emails have been going to his trash. In case, you know, what's your email?
It's the school's email. So it's my first name dot last name at mel.citytech.cuny.edu.
Let's see. Let me stop sharing for 1 second. Can you again post it in the chat? So you know, maybe I made a typo.
Okay.
If you can post it, guys. If you want to take a break, you can go ahead. You know, but let me see if I can help her with this email thing. So just post it again, and I'll send you an email right away, so we can see if it gets to your account. Okay, let's see. I'm gonna copy this, Kaylin, and let me compare it to my email here. Oh, you're right. It's not in my list anymore. I must have deleted it last week or something. Okay, I put it back in my email list. And
Okay.
let me just give me a second to send you a quick, just to confirm that it works. I'm just gonna call this email, test. Kayla, okay, I'm sending it right now. Just check your email. Make sure that if that works, then everything should be okay for next week.
Okay, let me refresh. Yes, I got it.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Yeah, I must have somehow deleted the email.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, guys, I'll see you guys in a few minutes, like 10 minutes. So. Thank you. All right, you guys back? You guys there?
Yeah, I'm back.
Yes, Professor.
Okay, just checking me now. Again, it's already 10:30, so I don't want to give you guys too much, but I do want to cover one more thing in the class. 1 second. All right, let me. So at this point, you're still seeing. No, you're not seeing the 3D Max, right? Let me share my screen again. Okay, so here we're back to 3D Max. So I won't get to cover today everything because yeah, I figure it was too much to cramp everything in one class. I will do a lot of it. There's a few more things I want to cover with advanced materials, and that we cover next time in class. But at this point, we've covered a lot, right? We've done things that are glossy, right? Things that are metallic, could be like a mirror. How to make the glossiness appear to be less glossy, and more like a matte finish, right? How to apply the basic materials to different types of objects, and how to scale them right, so they look correct in the scene, right? I mean, we could do other things. I think before somebody in class had mentioned, or could be a different class. What if this is meant to be wood here, right? Let me just click it and isolate it, right? And you want the front to be a different material, right? What do you typically do for that occasion? Like, what do I have to do to be able to, I think we covered it in class before.
I think you select the mesh
Yes.
compared to mesh, and then select the face.
Yes, okay. So if I click on this box, right, and I go to properties, we can see that it's a box, right? And it has two different parameters, map scalar and UV map. So at this point, I cannot modify this box, because it's controlled by this box, and that controls length, width, and height. So what I have to do is I have to explode this box, right? So if I click on this box and I right click it and I go to convert to editable mesh, right? Right click it, convert to editable mesh, right? Nothing, it doesn't look any different over here, but when I look at the properties, I lost the box property, and I lost the map scalar, and I lost the UVW map. It still applied correctly, but if you need to make a change to the scale, you're going to have to reapply the material again. So, but at least now I can use any of these tools down here, right? I can use polygon, and I can pick this one here, and I can do detach, right? And I can call it, I don't know, front face, right? And do okay. So at this point, this box has two different things. I can click on this box here, right? I can go to materials, right? And what I would do, just to be sure, is I would reapply the material again. So just apply, and then go back to UV map, box, map scalar, material, map scale, okay. Again, give it the scale you want, and then apply pick the one in front, and pick any number. It could be the one chrome, it could be the red one, it could be brick, right? And we have now applied something else. Again, to this one, you have to apply again the UVW map. In this case, I will use planar because it's a plane surface. It's no longer a box. And then I would do the map scalar. Let's see here. Oops, not that one. Delete. Do the, here, okay, perfect. And we can now scale this, right? So at this point, we could apply, I'll do now end isolate, and we can start to create, more complex shapes, right? In case we don't, because again, it would be very unrealistic to have this material applied to the entire, object. So that could be, complex. You guys can try applying different things to different objects, right? The other material that I do want to cover today in class is glass, right? So glass is, again, a very important material. And glass could eventually lead to water, right? That we'll do next class in a more advanced. But let's look at what glass, can do, right? So let's get a new material. So I'm gonna go here and just load a default V-Ray material. We'll call it just glass. So what are what makes glass? What are its properties? Can you guys tell me?
Clear.
So the main difference between, you know, the, obviously this red glossy sphere, right, is that glass is what?
It's clear.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, clear, yes. All right, so, or transparent, right? Or it could be also translucent, right? So clear, transparent, the same thing, right? What is translucent?
It's like when you can
Like
like a
away.
Okay, okay, but it's, again, clear, obviously we know what's clear, we know what's transparent. Translucent is glass that could be used for, as a privacy, right? It could be a glass bathroom door, you know, something like that, where you can see a figure behind it, but you don't see any detail, right? It kind of blurs the image behind the glass, right? So that's one type of glass. But let's first start by making a very simple clear glass, right? So let's start by, again, give it a proper name. The diffuse, make it a dark charcoal. You know, dark color creates a better looking glass that is much more, it looks very clean and sharp. Then, is glass reflective?
yeah.
Yes.
It can be.
And again, so first of all, turn off Fresnel, right? Because glass is a very smooth surface, right? And then obviously reflective, again, it could be different types of glass, you know, it could be mirror glass, right? So again, I'm gonna make it reflective, but I'm gonna stay, you know, in the dark gray. I'm not gonna go lower because then it becomes, then it starts to look like a mirror finish, right? So for now, let's keep it, you know, along, looks like a dark charcoal. And if you want to be specific, I'm at 74 for all the numbers on the right side. Okay, so now it's okay, we have a color to the glass. We have a quality to the glass, that means it's very glossy. What's missing now?
The color.
What's missing is the transparency, right? To make it clear, right? So we're gonna go now to the next tab, right? We have here, obviously, reflect, right? That deals with the reflection. And then we have below here, refract, right? Refract controls transparency. And again, we have black, right? So black means solid. No light is gonna pass through this material. If you go all the way to white or less, right? All the way to white means it's perfectly clear, and anything between is more or less translucent, right? So watch what happens here as I lower the number, lower the color. I mean, glass is a bit more complex. So, okay, so we can see something here happening, right? That means that we can see a reflection from the other side of the sphere, right? And I'm gonna go all the way down here to, I won't go all the way to white, right? But, you know, close enough to like 245, right? And you see what this, you know, now it looks like a glass sphere, right? So I'm gonna hit okay, right? So there we have our glass looking sphere, right? And let's try to apply it to something, right? So first of all, I'm gonna change my sun. Let's see here. So let me move, okay, I'm gonna move these things over here. I'm gonna move this thing that I had before, and I'm gonna make the sun, instead of going that way, I want it to come towards me. So I want the sun to shine through the glass here, right? And so I can see it in the camera. And this panel, I'm going to rotate it so it's perpendicular to the sun. There. All right, perfect. So now let's you know, let's apply the glass, right? I'm gonna click in the surface, open the materials, select here and apply, right? Of course, you know, you're gonna see that it becomes transparent, right? And at one point, you can't see it, right? So in this thing, you might hit F4. F4 just shows the basic outline or the geometry of the object, right? So we can see at least where it's located. But you can always do, again, F4 to turn off, I don't know. So, and let's do a rendering and see what this kind of looks like. Oops. So let me cancel this. It should be view. And of course, you know, the glass right now, it's not gonna look very good, right? Because what's missing? Oh my gosh, what's missing? What makes glass look like glass?
A little reflective.
Exactly, yes. The environment, right? Right now, obviously, there's no clouds, there's no trees. It's, you know, it's just reflecting an empty scene. So, you know, if there's nothing to reflect, glass is not going to look like glass, right? It will look like, I don't know, like anything, right? So maybe I'm gonna try to move some stuff, you know, within the glass. So maybe let's, I'm gonna take, where was it here? Let's take this thing here. Let's put it behind the glass here. Let's maybe take this object here. I'm gonna copy it somewhere here. Again, we can't see it there, but so that maybe it reflects something, right? So let's try again to render. There we go, right? So now we see something on the glass, right? Here. So now we can tell that it's glass, right? Otherwise, again, if I hide every single element here and I put render, it's gonna look like a transparent surface, but it won't look glossy because there's nothing to reflect in the glass, right? So obviously it will look much better once we work in a more detailed, you know, project, right? But for now, you know, we have the basic quality. It's clear or transparent. It's reflective, so we can see other elements of the scene, right? And the light does pass through it. So we can see that the shadow gets modified because of the glass, right? So what else can glass do? I'm gonna take this one here. I'm gonna copy it to the side. So now we have two glass planes, right? And I'm gonna, actually, I'm gonna move down again. I'm gonna copy this one down here. And we're gonna call this glass 2, right? So this way we can see a difference between just regular glass, which I applied here, and this one here. So this one here, I'm gonna select it and I'm going to apply glass 2, right? And let's make a change to this one. So before I had the diffuse in a very dark charcoal gray. What if we make the diffuse be red? You know, what happens to the glass? Can you guys see a difference between this and this? It's very minimal.
Yes.
Or let's say here, right? So let's render again. So what it does here is, again, it gives the glass a little bit of a tint, right? You know, like, but the only problem with this, it's not really realistic, is that even though the glass is a little bit tinted, right? You can't make it truly a red glass, right? And what happens to the shadow? Is there any difference in the shadow? No, right?
It's a little darker, maybe.
A little darker, but imagine having a red window, right? And the sun shines through the window. What's gonna happen to the shadow? It's gonna be also what? Red, right? So imagine colored glass, right? Let's see. 1 second. Let me just do a quick stop sharing and show you guys something. Share screen. All right, like this, right? You know, color glass, you know, here, right? Glass with the color, you know, as the sun hits the glass, is going to affect heavily the color of the glass, right? So if we have a green glass, we're gonna get a green shadow, right? And same thing applying with the other things. So no matter what it is, you know, as light passes through glass, it will affect the scene on the inside and create, you know, pretty nice looking environment. So when I go back to this, for example, you know, just modifying the diffuse color doesn't modify the shadow. It just gives the glass a tint, but you know, it's not really. So this I will keep always as kind of like a dark charcoal gray. And if you want to really get glass to be color, right, you have to modify this panel over here. If you see here where it says the fog color, right? White is by default, you know, clear glass. But if I were to change this and make it red, you know, here, can you see what happens to the sphere, right? So now it truly becomes, you know, a glass-looking sphere, right? And if I take this one here and again apply this one and render, what you see a significant difference between the other one, right? So now the panel is red, right? And the shadow that goes through it is also, you know, pink or something, right? In red color. So we can do other things. For example, if let's make a new glass. I'm gonna copy this here. Let's call this glass 3, okay, for example. What colors do we have? we have, let's make green, right? So let's take this one here. Let's go somewhere in the green tones. Okay. And we can play here to make it darker green or like that. Okay. So we have a green glass, and let's make a change over here. So I'm going to take this, we don't need this panel. I'm gonna move it here. Let's overlap these panels. So if I put this panel over that one, right, and I give this panel a color of green glass, and this is a red glass, and we overlap both of them, would there be a difference in the shadow? What
Yeah, the
mix red and green? What color do you get?
Like purple?
Yes, exactly. So let's see if we get purple, yeah, or something that looks like purple. Somewhat, yes. I mean, it's purplish, but it is working, right? So see, as we combine different colors, we're gonna get different effects of the glass, right? So I mean, it's a pretty cool effect, if you have working on a building, and you have all these colors that you want to apply to, the glass can be used for many things, whether it's clear glass or color glass. All right, so right now, this glass is, okay, let me cancel this. So we can do color glass, you can do any color you want, right? So if let me say I delete this one here, right? Actually, no, let me take this one and I'll put it in front of something. Let's see here. So it's blocking part of the sphere over here, right? I'm gonna delete that one. This one, I'm gonna give it back the clear glass, right? So when I put clear glass and I render, I should see a perfectly clear view of these elements that are behind the glass, right? But let's try to make the glass like before to be translucent, right? So it's not perfectly clear, right? Light still will pass through the glass, right? But it will start to obscure the view behind the glass, right? So if we go again to where it says refract, again, this part controls the transparency, right? And the part below it, again, glossiness, that controls the amount of how translucent it is, right? So if I take this glass, right, you see now it's taking a lot longer to preview, and I put the glossiness to like 0.7. Watch what happens to the glass, right? And this might take a little time because it starts to make it more complex. So it's even slowing down my computer here. Like my mouse starts to freeze. Again, this shouldn't be this big ever because it eats up all your memory.
Mine crashed like 4 times already.
Yeah, so don't do this. My computer is super fast and this is slowing it down. So I'm doing it just for you guys to see better, but try to keep it as it is there. And it's still trying to render this part. So see, I can even close it. So at this point, I'll let it work, and it's better to be patient than to start clicking close it because that can crash the whole computer or your 3D Max file. I mean, once you deal with glass and something translucent, it really becomes complex for the V-Ray, and it starts to add up a lot of time. So there we go. So you see, added some type of noise, right, to it. So again, let me go back to this one, apply that one, and render. It might take longer, right? Right now, at this point, we don't see much behind this. So let me just cancel this. And at this point, I'm not going to show the preview. I'm just going to change the number. Let's make it a 0.9, right? And I'm going to just render right away. All right, perfect. The 0.9, we get a better idea, right? It looks like a frosted glass, right? We see detail of the ball or the sphere and this thing, but it's so distorted that really we don't see much. So again, for glass, I wouldn't recommend going, anything below 0.8, right? Once you go below that, then it starts to get really complex for the V-Ray, and it takes a long, long time to render. So, I mean, if I do like a 0.95, which is not that much, it will still have a pretty nice effect on the rendering, right? We can see a little distortion here. You might go to 0.8, but don't go, I wouldn't go below 0.8, otherwise, you could cause the computer to crash. So there we get, glass, color glass, and glass that is translucent, right? Again, don't forget to always save your file a lot. So that's pretty much everything that I want to add for today's class. You know, it's a lot of things for you guys to practice, right? So again, try to apply to, you know, these shapes you guys have here, these individual shapes, you know, make all these things that I made today in class. I mean, actually, this one I didn't show you guys. If I take this shape here and I move it here, let me delete this one. I'm going to put this here. I'm going to make this one be, again, this glass. That would look pretty nice as a shape. So let me render again. So that looks like a, you know, being that complex shape, you know, it makes for a perfect glass shape, you know, because it makes for pretty complex shadows. The light will pass through it differently. So this looks really nice, you know, with glass. So again, try something like that and see what the glass look like. And as you guys try these things, you know, complete the whole rendering and save those renderings so that you can show me next time. So definitely start to document all this, right? You know, put a bunch of cameras in the scene. You can have more than one camera. So, and again, right now I have in this scene one camera. I can take this camera here, right? For example, select it, and I can do shift again, right? And I can copy it, you know, do copy, don't do anyone else, because if I do instance, for example, if I change the camera angle, it will change the angle for all the cameras. So for cameras, I want to always be, you know, separate. So do copy here, and you can put a camera, let's say, you know, here. You can take another camera here. You can move it over here. You see, every camera will get its own name. So once I go to my camera viewport and I go to view here, and I go to camera, I'll have three options, you know, view 1, which is this one. I have view 3, which is that one, view 2. So again, as you create more cameras, try to capture, you know, interesting views, you know, of your materials, right? And I would say, you know, try to get at least 3 shots. You know, if you want to do more, then please, you know, do more. But at least 3 shots for tomorrow's class. I mean, sorry, not tomorrow's, for next class. And afterwards, we're gonna put those shots in the class folder, right? So if we go to here, right, which is our class folder, Friday, we have the weekly renderings, right? So I'm gonna put a folder now here, and unfortunately, we don't have class next week. So our next class is the 25th. So I'm gonna put here a folder, 09, 25, 20, right? So inside this folder, everyone should make their own folder with their name and drop their renderings, right? And actually, because I won't see you guys for 2 weeks, you know, let's just double that. Let's make 6 renderings per student, right? So just so you guys will have more time to practice, you know, and take a rendering of glass, you know, different color glass, break, whatever you guys want. So do at least 6 renderings. If you want to do more, and make sure they're there by next class. So from that point on, every class will start by going over the folders, addressing any problems from the renderings, and, you know, and addressing any questions in the class. And let me start this.
Professor, when will you post this to YouTube?
I'll do it today, yeah. Once this is done, you know, it'll take a little bit of time to compress the video, and then it'll be up by tonight.
Okay.
Yes. Again, if it's not there by tonight, send me an email, because it means I forgot, you know, my kids, you know, I forget a lot of things. So I'll do it by tonight, yes.
All right, thank you.
I think, you know, that's all I really want to cover in today's class. You know, make sure you practice, you know, and try to get those things ready so we can, you know, start to move on to something a lot more advanced next class. You know, next class, I want to jump into the actual project in the class. So dealing with an architectural space. Yeah, any comments, questions for today's class?
So Professor, just to
Yeah.
verify,
Sure, Angelica.
so we just have to like practice with the software and just review.
Everything I did in the video, I want you guys to also do, right? And
Okay.
document it to renderings, right? So render, save it, you know, and to save it, you know, I don't think I covered that. So let's see. If I render this image, right? Let's say I do cancel here. I do save here, right? Save.
I can't see your where you sharing, Professor.
Okay, let me go back to share. Okay, here we go. So let's say, you know, I got the correct camera there. I hit render. You know, let it finish. Okay, let's see. So here I'll do save over here, right? Do save. Obviously find the folder. I'm gonna make a Friday weekly renderings. I'm gonna call it just test, right? Give it a name. Give it a name, yes, test. In your case, let's see. In your case, actually, let's do this, you know, to make it precise. In your case, you know, to be precise, you know, give it like this, the picture. So last name, in this case, my last name, right? Beta, first name, right? Esteban, right? Then we have 3592, right? And I don't know, image 01, image 02, 03, right? So it's everything's organized, right? And then the file type will be JPEG, right? So JPEG file, hit save, and then it'll give you this bar. Just move the best all the way to the right. Don't change those here, just go to best and do okay. And then the image will save in that folder, right? So all you guys have to do is make your own folder with your name and then start to make those images and put them there. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, guys. So in that case, you know, I'll let you go. You know, enjoy the weekend, and I'll see you guys in a bit. But any questions, you know, let me know by email. Okay.
Thank you, Professor.
All right, guys. Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Professor. Have a good one.
Take care, okay.
Have a good weekend.